Hello and welcome. Just checking everything. Great. Everything's up. Welcome to the live stream today, Saturday. And yeah, we're going to tie fly like usual and chat and hang out. Today I am tying the fiery brown out of Pryce-Tannat. Interesting, and it's listed as the fiery brown Irish. Interestingly enough, it does not appear in E.J. Malone's book. There are a number of fiery brown patterns in E.J. Malone's book, but this one in particular does not appear. So that's kind of interesting. But the pattern listed in Pryce-Tannat is significantly more complex than the ones in Malone, and even though it's more complex, it's still a really great starting pattern for beginners. A lot of the Irish salmon flies are. They're a little bit simpler usually. They don't have quite as many sides. They may not have toppings. In general, the bodies are a little less complex, and so they really do make a great starting point. Just a few announcements. If you want to see more of my work, go check out my Instagram at justwondering.brad. If you would like to support the channel or perhaps purchase a fly you've seen me tie on the live stream, head over to my Etsy shop. It's Studio1213 on Etsy. On my Instagram, I am running a giveaway at 500 followers. We're getting close. We kind of stalled out at 450, but when we get to 500, I'll be doing a big giveaway. Anything else? In terms of like technology and technological improvement, I was able to replace the hard drive and some other components on a older desktop. It seems to be working great. I would love to try and use that desktop for the live stream, just because it gives me a few more options. However, I don't have it doesn't come with a webcam, so I'm using the built-in webcam on my laptop right now. I would love to get a high-definition webcam for my desktop so that we can stream off that. It's a little bit more powerful. Even though it's an older computer, it's a little bit more powerful than this laptop that I'm streaming on right now. And also, it has the advantage of being plugged into the Ethernet, so the internet's a little bit more reliable. But again, I'm still hoping to get a high-definition webcam for that. And if you purchase something from my Etsy shop, all of that money goes back into improving the stream, including improving the technology behind it. What else? I think that's it for announcements. So today, hopefully, we'll get through the entire fly if I shut up and stop gabbing and start tying. Put that away. And let's get to work. So the Irish flies, and I'm not going to talk my way through a lot of techniques today. I'm going to try and avoid it, just because I've done a lot of that. And I'm hoping to do some how-to videos when I can afford the video editing software. I know there are free programs out there. I've tried a couple of them. I haven't liked them very much because there are things that I would like to do with the video editing that just aren't possible with free programs. You get what you pay for, and free just ain't doing it for me. The other thing is, you see me tie a lot of these techniques before, so I don't think I need to explain too much about them. Just gonna tie a really nice fly, point out why it's great for beginners and all that. But yeah, Irish flies, great beginner flies. The title for today's live stream, incidentally, includes the war cry of the Irish Brigade from the American Civil War. The Irish Brigade was a one of the what they called an ethnic brigade, ethnic units fighting for the Union. It was made up primarily of regiments raised in New York. Um, chief amongst them, the 69th New York. Nice. But the 69th New York was raised kind of as a state militia, sort of, by a very prominent Irish revolutionary in New York, and that regiment, the 69th, served as the basis for the Irish Brigade. Now, the Union was a little bit hesitant to raise ethnic units. So, like, amongst German immigrants or Irish immigrants, but they ended up raising the Irish Brigade, or forming an Irish Brigade, because they needed to secure support for the war amongst the Catholics and the Irish immigrants in the Northeast. And so this was the way of doing it. It ended up being the 69th and 2 additional New York units. For a while, the 28th Massachusetts was part of the brigade, but they were not Irish Catholic, and so they objected to being brigaded with the kind of the Fenians, as they said. So the 29th Massachusetts was swapped in, and that was a predominantly Irish, Massachusetts Irish regiment. And then I think it was like the 116th or 118th Pennsylvania was also added, and that was a primarily Irish regiment from like the Philadelphia area. So it was one of several, I believe, predominantly Irish units, but is the most famous. Served the 69th served from the beginning, being a militia unit. It served from the beginning, from First Bull Run through to the end. The brigade was actually formed in 1862. Served in the Peninsula Campaign through to Gettysburg. It was disbanded and then reformed. It was disbanded for a while after the Gettysburg campaign, after Spotsylvania Courthouse specifically, because the brigade had been decimated and virtually taken down to like the level of or the numbers of like a regiment, and then they were reformed and they served through, and that form of the Irish Brigade served through to the end of the war. Currently, the fighting 69th, the New York National Guard, carries on the legacy of the Irish Brigade. And that unit served through World War I, World War II. So, but their war cry of the Irish Brigade is Faugh, ballaugh. I believe that's how you pronounce it. And just means clear the way. Now, the Irish Brigade in the Civil War, American Civil War, is famous for having taken the most casualties, although it's not the highest percentage of casualties, I believe. It is the highest, like, raw number of casualties, and I believe it's somewhere around 1,700 total casualties in combat. They took a lot of those casualties at Fredericksburg, where they were one of the units that charged Mary's Heights above the town of Fredericksburg. And that was an interesting engagement because the Heights were being defended by the Irish, or I guess I think it's Irish Revolutionary Brotherhood, which was a uh, Confederate Irish unit. So you had Irish shooting at Irish. And it's kind of indicative of the divide within the Irish immigrant community during the American Civil War. A lot of Southern Irish kind of saw the Union, the federal government, as like just another England, trying to impose their will, I guess. And then, well, the Northern Irish disliked the fact that the South was being supported by Great Britain. So that little bit of conflict within the Irish community is why you could find Irish units fighting on both sides of the Civil War. So one thing you'll notice is I have this very nice crest feather. I have this very nice crest feather. It's very flat, and it's also very straight. This crest feather doesn't require any additional straighting. And one thing about and the place to find these particular crest feathers is if you take a typical tippet patch and you look right at the top, so where the tippets start. Usually there's a couple of crest feathers that come along with every tippet patch, and these are the crest feathers that are very straight, very flat, perfect for if you want a flatter tail. I like a flatter tail on flies that don't have toppings, and even when a fly has toppings, I still like a fairly flat tail, relatively speaking. So that's the best place to find them, is right at this top area of a tippet patch. Yeah, and here's another one that just kind of fell out of the bag. This one's perfect for a nice flat tail, as you can imagine. And usually, not always, but usually the toppings, the crest feathers that come right at the top of a tippet patch are usually a little bit darker in color, a little bit richer in color, because in that area they're starting to transition to the tippets. So yeah, these are very nice crest feathers for tails. And as always, trimmed it down just a stubble around the tie-in point, so you can see that. And that stubble is going to help me tie it in flat and keep it secure. As always, want to make sure it's centered. Now, this is a entirely dubbed body, and there is no butt. So, and I have my pattern on the second screen up here, so I'll keep referencing my recipe. So, without a butt, normally I would be a little bit more circumspect about thread bulk building up in the tail area. However, because this also has a dubbed body, I'm not too worried about it. So because this is a beginner fly, I did want to talk a little bit about the tools that I'm using. Obviously, a vise. However, as you can see, this is not like some fancy multi-jaw rotary vise. As much as I would love to have one, you don't need one to tie these flies. Anybody who tells you you need one of those fancy vices to tie these flies is wrong. I mean, they're nice to have, certainly, but they're not necessary. Actually, as always, I'm going to just wax a short section of thread here, just to help bind my tail down. So I'm tying on what is essentially a beginner's vise, or an introductory level vise. I bought this vise. I didn't buy this vise. This was a birthday gift for me when I was like 10 years old. Maybe even, yeah, maybe I was 10. So I've had this vise for over 20 years now. And I will say, I want to recall, as I recall, like I said, it's been 20 years. This style of vise was marketed by Regal. Now, this is not a Regal vise, but this was, I believe, like Regal branded entry level toolkit. And this is what the vise, and this is the vise that came with it. That was so long ago. I've talked to the Regal reps recently, and they don't remember Regal ever offering this as a option. But I'm pretty sure this came in a Regal branded kit. So, anyway, as usual with a dubbed body, I'm going to lay down a layer of waxed thread. Having a layer of waxed thread on the body, as well as waxing your thread that you're using for the dubbing, actual dubbing, I think helps the dubbing, stick a little bit better. It doesn't need to be like a complete a whole layer or a smooth layer of wax thread. It just needs to be enough wax thread that as you wrap the dubbing on, the dubbing gets trapped between two wax threads. Yappy little dogs. I have the window open because it gets really stuffy in here. I have to have this door closed so I'm not disturbing my family. But the neighbors are out there. Dogs can't help it. Anyway, so I'm going to continue wrapping. Now there is a hackle, so I'm going to have to remember to tie in a hackle about a quarter of the way down the body. Fortunately, this body is divided up into quarters. So the first quarter is bright orange, and then we'll tie in the hackle. We'll tie the second quarter, and we'll tie the second half. So it's 1 quarter of bright orange, 1 quarter of pale blue, and then half fiery brown. I'm actually going to use golden brown seal's fur because this slightly lighter shade actually matches my golden brown or my fiery brown hackle a little bit better. And then it's got a J throat, and of course this is the longest J I have. I'm tying on what is the 3/0 Gaelic Supreme. This particular hook is about the same size as a 1/0 Pryce-Tannat from Gaelic Supreme, so who knows? But first things first, 1 quarter orange. And I'm actually using this is 187 hot orange from John McLean at feathersmc.com. Not sponsored. Don't need a whole lot for just a quarter of the body. So what I really like about these Irish flies is that they're simple, but they're still really, really attractive. So if you've ever seen like the Irish version of like, Thunder and Lightning, Whereas you'll see this version of the fiery brown, really attractive, but they're also very straightforward to tie. And they're kind of a step up. So a lot of people will do simple strip wing flies. So you can do like a strip wing version of a thunder and lightning, or you could do like a teal winged version of some of the common steelhead flies. And then when you start doing married wing flies, you might do a simple like thunder and lightning without an underwing. And then you might do the Irish version of the thunder and lightning, which has a tippet underwing. And so you can just keep progressing like that by adding different components. And Irish flies make it kind of a great little diversion because they are in that kind of beginner intermediate space, but they can have a little bit more complexity. So like tippet underwings, some more interesting like body hackles and body compositions. Maybe a little too much blue there. You know what I forgot to do? I forgot to tie in my hackle. So I'm actually just going to leave my dubbing there because it's out of the way. Keep preparing my hackle here. Just like I believe it was last week or the week before, this is in fact a schlappen, but I was very careful to select one that didn't have a whole lot of webbing. So the interesting thing about fiery brown is that a lot of the fiery brown patterns don't actually call for fiery brown hackle. A lot of them call for a blood red hackle, as they would say. And what this is actually in reference to is a kind of a reddish brown, natural reddish brown rooster hackle. So kind of like what you would use, in the brown component of like an Adams dry fly is probably the best way to describe that color. I can show you my cape that I would normally use. The Pryce-Tannat pattern, interestingly enough, is one of the few fiery brown patterns that I've actually seen specify a fiery brown hackle. So normally I would use from this dry fly cape, which is very nice, kind of reddish brown, natural reddish brown hackle. And this is when they say blood red hackle, this is usually what they're talking about. All right, so just trimming a few of the bushier bits because I don't want it to be too bushy yet. You could pick these bodies out. I definitely prefer not to. Unless specified. And I certainly don't like to have the bodies picked out before I've wrapped the rib because by keeping them pretty tightly dubbed before ribbing, it does make ribbing and winding hackles a little bit easier. All right, and then half the body in fiery brown fur. Gently dub. And get a few chunks of wax. Okay. I'm going to do this in a couple different chunks as usual. And I want a fairly nicely tapered body. Again, because this says it took an underwing. Having a nice taper to the body helps just helps the underwing lay a little bit more neatly against the body. So, so that's the body. Now this does have a black curl head and an additional throat. However, I still think I need to crowd this head just a little bit more since I have plenty of hook shanks sticking out the front as it is. So I'm just going to dub a little bit extra of a section and just to bring me up a little bit closer to the eye. Okay, there we go. Now I'm going to wrap the rib. Be careful not to catch the hackle. One turn over the orange, down under, one turn over the blue. I'm going to do 5 turns total, so you end up with 3 turns over the fiery brown bit. Want to make sure all of your turns are equal, so it's not quite equal here. All right. Just going to fold and wind the hackle. So the hackle is being wound this way, and so I want one side to lay against the hook or against the rib, but I want all the fibers to point rearwards. So just going to fold the hackle as usual on the fly. This hackle got a little bit turned around here. Just got a couple of fibers, I think, folded the wrong way. There we go. tie it off here. Hood. Again, by working my thread backwards and forwards while tying off the hackle, you can get it between the fibers so you don't pinch any under the thread as you tie it in, tie it off. A couple of good solid wraps just to bind down that tag end. So one thing going back to what I was going to say, you know what? Nuts. And I realized I think the tail actually has tippet in the tail, and I forgot it. So guess what? This is a little bit of a variation here. It's all right. That's all right. It looks fine. So one of the things I wanted to talk about is a little, because I consider this to be beginner fly, or at least beginner intermediate fly. Talk a little bit about the tools. Like I said, I'm just using a beginner vise. I always have. You don't really need any particularly special vise to tie these things. Probably the most important tool. I use a bobbin for the thread. Again, I know people who tie without bobbins. Scissors, you want a good pair of micro scissors. These are Dr. Slick, I believe. Yep. You want a pair of hackle pliers. I don't actually use these a whole lot for winding hackle. I actually use these a lot more for winding herl. And that's and then a good pair of smooth jawed pliers. So these jaws and these pliers are flat. They don't have any serrations. They're great for crushing the stems of tippets for underwings, or jungle cock for sides. They're good for holding things or manipulating little things. And that's pretty much it. Those are the things I use the most. I do use a bodkin for applying like head cement or picking out details, but in terms of the actual tying of the fly, I don't actually use a bodkin all that much. Now, onto the J hackle. So this is a Eurasian J. This is the correct J. You do not want to use North American Jay, blue jay, because that is, at least in North America here, that's a protected species. Migratory songbird, all that, and you're not really supposed to be in possession of its feathers unless you have a license. At least that's the way I understand that particular bit of the law. And as you can see, this jay hackle actually, if you want the bright blue side to be forward, you actually have to wrap it in the wrong direction. You only get like 5 or 6 of these per side off of a J, and so you're inevitably going to end up wrapping one of these hackles in the wrong direction or in the counter direction to what you're used to. It's okay. You just wrap it on like a normal hackle. You have to remember to wind it, in the other direction. Before I do that, wax my thread just to, again, add some security. So I'm going to tie it on. I'm going to tie it on in my normal position, which is on the side of the hook facing towards me, even though I'm going to wind it in the other direction. That's because I always want my first wrap, particularly with J, but also with like Galena, which is the speckled guinea. You always want that first wrap to be under the hook because you're only going to get so many wraps with short hackles like this. And so you want to make sure as many fibers as you can get under the hook, since that's where you can really see them. So I'm just going to wrap towards me. This is a left-handed feather. tie right-handed. Come on. And then when I tie it off, I'm actually going to tie it off on the side opposite me, so away from me. And that way I've got 2 full or 3 full turns under the hook and 2 full turns on top of the hook. And actually, you know what, with this feather, I might actually be able to get another full turn. This is a fairly long J hackle. Can I? No, that's an awful lot of bulk, though. You know what? I'm just going to leave it at 2 because this is going to get bulky really fast. One of the things about J feathers is their stems, their rachises, are extraordinarily thick. So when you tie it off, it sometimes helps to flatten it a little bit. And then tie it off really well. Now, one of the things I will need to do, because the stem of the J feathers is so thick, you want to add a few extra turns of thread right in front of the J hackle. That just helps the wing so it doesn't have to step up over the hackle stem, and just makes for a smoother transition with the wing. Now, at this point, I am going to build up bulk just a little bit more. Take the thread to the start. I'm going to whip off the white thread. As you can see, normally I would use a whip finisher, and only because I have a whip finisher, but you don't need a whip finisher, just need 2 fingers. Just want to demonstrate that that is a superfluous tool, unless you're doing very small flies. These are not very small flies. So I'm going to switch to black thread as usual. And again, the reason why I switched to black thread is because switching to black thread under a black head, 1, it hides any of the white thread that you might miss with head cement, and 2, it just hides any gaps that might exist. It makes them a little less noticeable. I think at this point in my tying career, I won't end up with too big of a gap, but J hackle, like I said, is fairly thick stems, so there can be a little bit more white showing, and I don't want any white showing, so I'm going to switch to black. And like I've said in the past, if this were going to be a brightly colored dubbed head and instead of a black curl head, I'd stick with white because the white thread won't show through the brightly colored dubbing. There you go. So I'm going to wind right up to the hackle. Again, just going to continue to build up that little bit of bulk just to make that a smooth transition for the underwing. All right, so the underwing calls for tippet, but it calls for tippet in strands, which means essentially I'm going to take a tippet feather with long enough fibers, and this one I think does, and I'm just going to strip off this tippet fibers off both sides and basically tie them in as slips. And they don't need to be very neat because it says tippet in strands, which means they could be broken up a little bit, mixed a little bit. Any of that's fine. Just want to make sure that the tips are aligned. And I'm just going to tie them in again as if they were strips, or, no, as strips, I should say, as if they are strips. There you go. Nothing complicated, and also that's kind of a nice underwing. I might want a little bit of a longer underwing, but I don't think I have any bigger tippets at the moment. Tippet and strands is usually best for smaller flies. Again, this is a 3/0 hook, which is just about the limit of both the J and tippet and strands. That's okay. And now onto the main wing, and that is scarlet, blue, and yellow. On the swan, of course, I'm going to use turkey. And florican, which I am going to sub turkey. Some very nice penciled palm turkey. So I have some very, very nice high contrast barred pencil palm. Makes a great florican substitute. It's maybe not quite as richly colored as real florican, but ooh, dropped feather. It does the trick. It looks good in a wing, so that's what I'm going to use. Speckled buster, I have that. So speckled and golden pheasant tail. I've got some long golden pheasant. I'm just going to leave in my feather caddy for now. So this is a pretty simple wing. I don't think I'm going to mix it too much. I think I like, again, going with the theme that these are simpler flies, which are, good for beginners. I'm not going to make this overly complicated by mixing my wing too much, if at all. So it's red, yellow, blue. So we'll just stick to the recipe, and I'm going to make the assumption. It may not be a good one, but I'm going to make the assumption, and we'll see how this looks, that the recipe is listed in bottom to top order. And we're going to do and orange. So we'll do 3 strands of each of the colors. So red, yellow, blue. Oops, other side. Okay. So let's see. Red. The order it's got it in is red, blue, yellow, orange. So red, blue. And all I'm doing is just putting the 2 strands, the 2 slips next to each other, and then just kind of preening them together. And if you're having a little trouble getting them to interlock, you can always just kind of bend them along their length. That helps kind of pull the barbs, the bits that help stick them together out a little bit further. Then yellow. Orange. So you just want to make sure that the tips are taper appropriately. These particular slips have a little bit raggedy tips, but in general, you can see there it's a pretty good taper on the ends. Okay, so that's that. Then florican, which I'm subbing with this very nice turkey, and again, I think I'm only going to do two strands, two fibers in each slip of this. Just because it is fairly striking in the wing. And again, two strands of speckled bustard, again, because it is a fairly striking component. So don't want to overpower or overbalance, I guess, the other components. And then I always end with a slightly broader strip of golden pheasant tail. And one of the reasons why I do that is because if it has a mallard roof on top, a significant portion of whatever's on the top of the wing will get covered by the mallard. So by having a slightly broader strip of golden pheasant, I'm just making sure that that doesn't lose any of its prominence in the wing, even when covered by mallard. So here's the wing so far. That's up to the speckled bustard. We'll do 4. Oh. So this is very nice golden pheasant tail. It's got some very nice long fibers. I don't need terribly long fibers. Again, this is only a 3/0 hook, so I'm actually going to take from the shorter fibers up near the tip. Even then, these are plenty long. So again, four fibers of the golden pheasant, just to make sure that that slip doesn't disappear under the mallard. Just going to line it up. So this is what the wing looks like as spec'd in the recipe. It's not bad. Don't know if I'd change anything. I might consider I don't know. Good order. I might consider moving the speckled bustard. So one of the things that you can do with the married wing is because you marry it together. If you don't like it, you can just pull it apart. So there's the. I'm going to pull the speckled bustard off, and I think I'm going to insert the speckled bustard between right in the middle of the section of colors. See how that looks, just to break that section up a little bit. If it doesn't look good, we'll just put it back where it was. If it looks good, great. And I will tell you, I'm already not such a huge fan, although it's not terrible. I think one of the things that when you're beginning with married wings, you shouldn't be afraid to abuse them just a little bit. You can marry them together. You can take them back apart. Here's what it looks like right now. Yeah, not. No, no. Don't like it there. But I do think it will do. Okay, so we're going to marry the blue and the yellow back together. I think I'm actually going to insert the speckled bustard between the florican, which is the penciled turkey, and the orange. Because I actually think having the orange and the somewhat pale pencil turkey, admittedly, this will just add a little bit of definition between the neutral colored fibers and the dyed turkey fibers. So I think that is a much neater wing. All right, so let's make the other side. Now that we know what we're shooting for, those fibers have a little bit of 3 of red. I'll try to be a little bit neater here. Put stuff away as I go. 3 of blue. Yeah, so you shouldn't. If you're just starting out with married wings, don't be afraid to take your wing apart, put it back together, make it how you like it. If the tips aren't aligned properly, pull it apart, realign the tips. The feathers, the fibers can handle it. Unless you're working with some really kind of crummy, matted down feathers, usually, turkey in particular, it can take it. And in fact, marrying, unmarrying, and remarrying a wing can help it marry together better. Because every time you unmarry the wing, you're pulling the barbs out. So if you think each fiber has a set of barbs that interlock like Velcro, and when you unmarry those fibers, you pull those barbs apart. And then when you marry them back together, they link together. Now, there's only so far you can take it, but for at least the first, 2 or 3 remarryings of the wing, it can actually be beneficial to marry and unmarry a wing. What else can I tell you? And most fibers, most wings that don't marry well together, it's either because you are using materials which are incompatible or just don't marry very well. So, golden pheasant generally, unless it's been really, really clean, like washed, may not marry together well. Some of the parrot feathers, like macaw, has a particular profile on its fibers. It marries well together, but it might not tie into the wing very well. Goose marries well, but it's very soft. So if you might be using incompatible fibers. It's why I use so much dyed turkey in place of swan. What else? The other thing is you might be using materials which are, like I said, dirty or matted. So one of the biggest enemy to getting good married wings is having oil on your hands. So before you start tying, you should wash your hands. That's good for both working with silks, but it's also really good for working with married wings because if you get the oils off your hands, what happens is the oils on your hands will mat down those barbs and prevent the wing from marrying properly. Let's see what's next. More faux floricking. Actually, you know what? I forgot. I meant to do speckled bustard first. You also kind of want to avoid feathers that come from animals that may have undergone some stress. Might have. Let's see if I have an example here. So some of this red turkey. Some of the fibers. So if you can see here, how this appears to have like stripes running through it, going this way. So here, these are called stress bars, and that what happens is when this feather is growing on the bird, when this feather was growing, actually being formed, through biological processes of the bird, this bird underwent some kind of stress at this point in the feather's development. And having a lot of these stress bars in your feather can make it more difficult to tie with. Certainly, it doesn't look good in a wing if you get a stress bar running through your wing, but these points can also make it more difficult to tie with. So, yeah, so those are my suggestions for married wings. Again, just don't be afraid to beat up your wing a little bit. And I know there's some guys out there who claim that cussing out your wing. I've heard some differing opinions about whether you ought to or ought not to cuss at your wing. I personally am a huge fan of the talk nicely to it, and you'll be more likely to cooperate. However, I do know that there are some people out there who fully endorse the cussing out your wing makes it easier. School of thought. Yeah, let's see. No, this is the right side. No, this is not the right side. Two. Oh, okay. I got it. These golden pheasant tails are so nice that I'm actually having a hard time remembering which side I started cutting on. Let's see. I just need 4 fibers. And again, I'm taking from the slightly shorter fibers near the tip because I don't need the full length fibers that are further down. Just a 3/0 hook. I think that's 4. I think that's just 3. Okay. so here I'm having a little bit of trouble getting this particular segment of golden pheasant tail to here. Let's see if I can get this. I might need to cut a new one. I wonder if I have. Let me try. So, one thing about turkey tails you will notice is that sometimes the tails recurve, which means that they scoop in the wrong direction on one side of the tail. So I think I might have had that turkey, so the turkey upside down because of that recurve. And show you what I mean shortly as soon as I get this wing married. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, that married a lot easier. All right, so there we go. There's the far wing. So what I mean is that if you look at a turkey tail, hopefully I can show this. Let me turn off this light because I think I'm washing out the tail. So if you can look at this tail, one side slopes this way, so the way you want it, and this side kind of curves up to this way, and that's what I mean by recurve. And it does make it so that not all turkey tails are fully usable. You can counteract that by marrying the recurve side into a strongly curving or correctly curving wing, as I've done here. But that recurve, if you're using a turkey only wing, that recurve could cause your wings to not marry together very well. And that happens a lot, particularly with the tail feathers. So if you know, like a turkey fan, the tail feathers that occur on the outside of the tails can recurve more sharply than the feathers towards the center. All right, so I'm going to put the wings, the two wings, back to back as usual. Just make sure that the tips are of a similar, they're both a little bit ragged, but it's all right. Kind of has some imperfect material there, but similar angle to the tips. All right, I'm going to remarry the red on the close side because that tip is just a little bit way further out. So again, you can just pull one slip off, just readjust. Simple, no drama. And in fact, might even be good for the wing. So again, align the wings here. Now, one of the things I do recommend is trimming. So if you can see the butt ends of the wings, how they're all different lengths, I do recommend trimming them to be at least similar in length. Just like that. That just helps the extra long bits not get in the way of the rest of the wing. I can tie this in here, like so. I think that it's a good length. And I'm going to pinch here. Now, one thing I find helps with tying in a large wing like this. This is a fairly robust wing. Maybe not most robust, but it is fairly robust. This is 20 fibers. is just to dampen the wing. You can use water and use saliva because that's handy. And that just helps soften the wing right at the pinch point. And then again, I soft loop it, and then I use this hand to raise the butts up. Again, so pushing up on the butts here. That just helps compress the top layers. And then I'm just going to snug it. Another soft loop, more compression, snug, and a couple of wraps. There we go. That is a set wing. Next, I'm going to wax my thread, as usual. This wax is getting to be a little bit crumbly. I've had it for a while, so every now and then I get chunks instead of a nice even coat, if you're wondering. Just going to give the wing a little bit of a pull this way. That helps bring the thread wraps in line with the tie-in point. And then I'm just going to gently, while holding the wing tightly, trim off. And again, I do it in stages so that I don't disturb the wing. Because again, the shearing action of the feathers, or the shearing action of the scissors can exert force on the wing through the via the butt ends or the stumps, and that can cause the wing to twist. So now with the wax portion of the thread, I'm just going to bind down the butts. There we go. That is the sides wing. Take a look. Hey, looks good. Doesn't always go that well, so I am chuffed with that. Just going to do a little bit of a quick cleanup, bag up all the extra feathers. Now, this has narrow strips of teal and narrow strips of summer duck as sides. So again, we'll marry the strips together. We'll tie them on one side at a time, along with the brown mallard or the bronze mallard over top. And we'll do one side at a time, reverse the thread, do the other side. Standard, bog standard, bread kern method. So. Just reorganized my chest of materials, so every now and then I forget where I put things. So summer duck refers to wood duck, and I should have some teal and some gadwall. I have some smaller teal for throats and things. But I think I'm going to have to use gadwall for this side. And that's not such a bad thing. I like gadwall. It's kind of a more striking version of teal. And I think teal is fairly striking, especially compared to mallards. So it is some very nice gadwall. So, as you can see, I've already been into this one pretty heavy, but it's a nice distinctive barring. So, first things first, we want to marry a narrow strip of barred wood duck with a narrow strip of gadwall or teal, which is gadwall. I'm actually going to go probably a little bit heavier than narrow because I want this to be seen. Again, this is not a fishing fly, this is a display fly, so. And I usually put the wood duck on top of the teal. Part of the reason for that is, as you can see, the gadwall or teal even has a fairly distinct curve. I kind of want to mitigate that just a little bit. The other thing is teal flank, or gadwall flank in this case, isn't always as long as summer duck or the wood duck. So by putting it on the bottom, it allows it to be a little bit shorter without looking like I purposely made it shorter. So there we go. Nice. Just gonna put that along the wing to the side. I'm gonna take one turn. Just pinch it up on the side. Next, we're going to tie on the mallard roof on this side close to me, and then I'll repeat the process on the other side so that you all can see it. The reason why I tie in the mallard and the other components this way, the duck components, is, and as I've always said, is that by reversing my thread, I have even pressure, or the same pressure, on each side. And so what that does is, because duck flank is such a soft material, if you have pressure that is uneven, it will tie in unevenly. It'll go in unevenly. So by reversing my thread, I've got even pressure, the same pressure on each side as it goes in. So I've got a nice bronze mallard slip here. It says broad, and I'm going to tie it in pretty long. It's going to have to be terribly long, but fairly long. It's going to go right on the top of the hook, right over the wing, and I can just make it follow. Now this will lay down on top of the wing a little bit better once I have the other slip in on the opposite side. So it's going to look a little bit messy now. I'm going to wax my thread, as usual. I just want to roll the mallet up to the top of the wing. I'm going to trim the ends. Using the wax thread again, bind down the ends of the tuck slips. I'm going to slip the thread between the stub of the blind eye and the gut, and I'm going to reverse my thread. So now I'm winding. So normally, as a right-handed person, I'm winding away from myself, and now I'm winding towards myself here. Cool. Next, we'll do the other side. So I just want to make sure that the duck is the same length. So I'm going to tie this here. That. And again, because I'm winding towards myself, okay. Take one more turn just to make sure it's secure. And relatively broad strip of mallard. So in order to get the mallard to follow the curvature of the wing, I just kind of preen the mallard so that it bends like this. And then I place it alongside. It's a little bit difficult when working on the far side of the wing, but place it alongside and right up at the top. So I want this to ride right at the top of the wing, winding towards myself as mentioned. Just like that. Oop. Nope. That was not right. Now I'm going to split. All right. There we go. Find everything down. Oop. I think the wood duck and the teal have disappeared up into the mallard. Just tease that out. Bodkin comes in handy here. Reach up. Ah, I see. Just kind of lost the curvature of the bronze mallard here, so just, for some reason this bronze mallard does not want to ride high. So you want the bronze mallard to be right at the top of the wing. So Bodkin, where did I put that duck? Let's fix this. So I just want to pull. There we go. There we go. All right. So what happened there was just the mallard had slipped down the hook and it didn't want to be at the top. And in doing so, covered the wood duck and the teal, which is not the platonic ideal of a bronze mallard roof. All right, so there we go. Make sure everything is centered on top of the wing by just giving it a pinch and a slight roll. And again, still wrapping towards myself. We're going to wax the thread. Don't know where my wax went. Everything's a mess. Typical fly tying day for me. Just wax. All right. So this has horns. Should probably tie in the far horn while I'm at it. That'll help. Horns are another one of those things where if you tie it in while reversing your thread, that can help. You don't have to, because of the kind of singular nature of the horn, but should probably do that now. Before I forget. So otherwise, this will be not only missing the tippet and the tail, but also horns, and that would not be good. So, one horn here. Yeah. Again, wax thread, bind down the ends. Go to the front, slip the thread under the blind eye, between the time the other horn. Bind it all down. Get myself a nice piece of hurl. Okay. Now this is where I use the hackle pliers the most. Just winding hurl. Just going to make sure the hurl is not going to get stuck pointing forward because that's unsightly. Just going to wind. Very nice, tight hurl head. Not like that. There's a bump somewhere. A little bump in the head that looks like it's messing me up here. Can't quite see. I need some light. Excuse me. Okay. Got a slight little bit of bulk under the head, which is just causing a little bit of a bump. It's causing the hurl to roll off the head. So, just going to... Now, if you're having trouble with the hurl rolling off the head. One of the things you can do, which I'm going to do here, is I'm going to wax my thread. I'm going to wax the thread, and I'm going to go back and go over the whole head with waxed thread. What that does is it gives the hurl a sticky base, something to stick to. It's not necessarily to secure anything in the head because everything in the head's already secure. But having something just for the hurl to stick to will help prevent the hurl from sliding. Fold out the hurl. Falling apart. Falling apart. All right. Again, a hurl has a right side up and a wrong side up. It's because hurl is T-shaped. In cross section. That T-shaped cross section means that when you tie it in, it's going to fold a certain way, and you want all the fibers to fold so that they're the back side of the hurl. So that means you have to tie it so that the T is up, so to speak. So let's try that again. Now with base of waxed thread. And as you can see, this hurl is not sliding down the head anymore. If you're still having trouble getting it to stick, even with the wax thread, you can take it and you can just you pinch the head like this. Your body heat will warm up the wax even a little bit and stick, cause it to get sticky again. And will help the hurl stick. All right, so we're going to stop the hurl there. Let's stop the hurl here. A couple turns. All right. A couple extra turns just to bind down all the fuzzy bits. And then we're going to whip finish, call it a day. So, as you can see, it's a fairly straightforward fly. It's very attractive. Most Irish patterns are. This is the fiery brown Irish, as described by Pryce-Tannat. Again, this is one of the more unusual versions because it does have more color in the body than just fiery brown. But very nice, very attractive, and a wonderful kind of intermediate step fly for beginner salmon fly tyers. So thanks for hanging out. Got a little chaotic at the end, not going to lie, but I'm a little bit of a messy tyer. Need to get better at cleaning up after myself. A little bit hard when I'm on stream and trying to crank out a fly, fairly quickly, so that you all don't have to sit there and watch me clean up after myself. But yeah. So yeah, this is the fiery brown, and thanks for hanging out. Again, if you'd like to see more of my work, go follow me on Instagram. I'm at justwondering.brad. If you would like to support the stream and help me continue to upgrade my technology that I'm using, you can purchase flies that I've tied on stream over at my Etsy shop. It's Studio 1213. And yeah, if you have questions, please feel free to put them in chat. I do answer. I do pay attention to chat. I might not answer right away, but I am reading all the chat comments. And thanks for hanging out. I hope everybody is staying safe and healthy, especially in these times. And take care.